side, and it'll pick you up a little bit bigger on the widescreen.
To the side?
Yeah, like portrait. There we go. Boom. There we go. Much bigger portrait now. All right, awesome.
Oh, okay, great.
Hey, well, good morning, everybody. It's Sunday morning. It's 8 a.m. Eastern time, 9 a.m. Atlantic. We are in Puerto Rico time, but David is on Eastern time. Welcome, David. This is the Perception Therapy Podcast. This is episode 30. I didn't think it would take me this long to get to 30 episodes, but I try not to go. I try not to do an episode just to do it, not to do it at force, and I try not to have nothing to say during my episodes. So I try to wait for guests and for good opportunities to arise, and we have one today. So David is our guest today. David is possibly still the president of the Consumer Advisory Board at Camilla's House. The Consumer Advisory Board sits on the board of directors as a voice for the patients and clients, I guess is another name that they gave them at Camilla's House. And I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself, David. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, sure. I'm no longer the president of the Consumer Advisory Board. I'm actually a board member. I gave that up a few months ago to take a position at a company that I have, but it was good to help to develop it and institute some really new, exciting activities that are helping the consumers. That's what we call the clients of Camilla's Houses. It's a homeless shelter and a clinic that serves the poor and homeless in downtown Miami. And the Consumer Advisory Board gives input and feedback to management. And it's a vehicle for the consumers to actually be involved in shaping the policies. And as I said, helping to create some exciting activities and to help folks get a step forward to be able to move on.
Right on. So that's how I met David. We were just speaking before we went online. We were speaking about the former CEO, Shed Boren, who graciously invited me to one of the Consumer Advisory Board meetings one day. He was brand new to the company at that time, and his biggest thing was shaking things up to make things more positive for the patients and the consumers, to make it a less prison-like environment, make it more hospitable, make it more welcoming, and I don't know exactly what it was he saw in me, but I was flattered at the invitation and, jumped into the meeting, met David and a handful of other patients that we had at the clinic and, started to form this bond with you guys. I was one of the few people who was considered administration by the staff, but not considered administration by the administration. So I was in that in-between loop where it was, according to the staff, I was one of the team, and according to the team, I was one of the staff. So when Shed came, that changed a little bit, and my position became a little bit more prominent in the administration role that it took. And so we started to learn things from the consumer side, and we were able to serve lunch with you guys a couple times to the overall patients at Camilla's, and we did that several times. I volunteered for that one a couple times, too many, as I was told by our HR person. Is Kathy still there? We may have him a little frozen anyway. Okay, but so I was involved in that for a while, and does nice, good, positive experiences.
Up a little bit.
Oh, okay. We're having some signal issues here. It's Puerto Rico for you. We'll be lucky if the power doesn't go down. We're having some freezing. I'm not sure what's being recorded right now and what's not. Google's got to figure this stuff out, man. It's not Puerto Rico internet's got to figure this out. But so That's how we met David. David subsequently is wow, David, what would you consider yourself as far as the legal eagle there? He's very well versed in the legal system. He was pivotal in helping to combat the law that they had passed in Miami to make homelessness a crime, basically. And they were jailing homeless people simply for being homeless. David, you can probably speak on that a little bit better, yeah?
Yeah, you're being a little generous to call me pivotal. I was certainly a part of it. And yes, that's exactly what happened. It's the name of there's a federal class action lawsuit called Pottinger versus the City of Miami. And Pottinger was one of three named plaintiffs in this class action. Were protesting the city police's abuse. Basically, they were criminalizing homelessness. They were doing some extraordinary abusive action and throwing them in the river. And actually, at one point, I think they'd piled up all the folks' belongings on the streets and set them in a park and set them on fire. A bonfire, which I think was, the city's open fire laws and pollution laws. But they're doing a number of abusive practices. Basically, it was very, very long, decade-old lawsuit. I think it started in like the mid 1990s and it went through the early 2000s, and it went up to the Court of Appeals twice. And Miami spent over $1 million in legal fees trying to combat it. Then they finally, after the second time, went to the Court of Appeals with a settlement, and it was a landmark settlement agreement in which the city agreed that this is there are certain life-sustaining activities individuals have to perform, such as bathing and going to the bathroom and things like that. And since they don't have a home, they have to do it in public. You shouldn't arrest somebody for doing those life-sustaining activities since they don't have a home to do it in private. The agreement, it's called the Pottinger Settlement, agreed that certain misdemeanors that homeless people, would commit as a result of these life-sustaining activities would not subject them to arrest. Okay, so that's basic. As I said, it was a landmark settlement. I'm not aware of any other jurisdiction around the United States that has this type of agreement in place, and it basically protects the rights of people who are homeless to at least live on the streets without fear of being arrested. Into it about 3 years ago. The original Pottinger unfortunately passed away sometime in, I think, the late or mid 2000s. And as a result of the city going back into court and trying to basically renege on the agreement in 2014, I think it was, I read about this in the newspaper, and as a result of my own bout with homelessness, I thought that this was time for, someone to take some action. And so I contacted the American Civil Liberties Union, and I got involved in a lawsuit. On as a named plaintiff, me and another colleague of mine, we're both named plaintiffs in this lawsuit, and we took over. And so I participated in the federal court proceedings to modify the agreement. And so the agreement got really modified a little bit around the edges, but the core principles of the agreement remain in place. That you can't arrest somebody for performing life-sustaining activities on the streets without at least offering them shelter first. And I do have a law degree. I'm not licensed to practice here in Florida. I do have a law degree, and I do plan on getting that license sometime in the near future.
Nice. We'll hope good things for you. So that was the turn where Shed was coming around and created the MATS program, wherein we would take in, I believe it was 300 homeless people every night and every morning they would be released upon, not released, the release sounds very imprisoned, but they were, free to go, as it were, in the morning. You're free to come sleep at night, and then in the morning you can go, or you can stay. You can have, lunch, breakfast here, whatever. And, I got to know several patients coming through that program as well. Actually, two of them ended up being my neighbors at one point, right before they ended up there. We were living in Kendall, and our downstairs neighbors, we lived in an apartment complex. And it was a brother and sister. You may remember them. I won't name them by name, but it was a brother and sister pair who came in at the same time. And the sister was very ill. She ended up being rushed to the emergency room that day. And the brother was housed at the shelter as well. There was a couple things surrounding Shed involving them too, so that's why I say you may know them. But they were, like I said, neighbors of mine who, through health reasons and through the fact that they were taking care of each other, found themselves unable to afford housing, and they ended up at the shelter. They had seen my uniform several times, and someone had sent them down there. I was unaware of the situation that was happening with them at the time, until I saw them in the hallway across the street, across from mine, in the building. So yeah, I mean, that was a big program that we were involved in. Sorry, we have traffic routinely drive by here. There's a main highway in front of my house that connects a little area of town to the rest of Puerto Rico. So it's an interesting travel route here. I mean, we see horses here all the time. And anyway, yeah, we that was one of the programs we took up, and involved in that in the sense of getting all these people health care in the morning, making sure that the system was up and running for the patient care coordinators and everything like that for the people who had to be there. We had they had started an art program in which our buddy Gary was the, I wouldn't say the main beneficiary, one of the beneficiaries of. Gary was able to showcase his talents, and has been recognized several times since then for them. I hope he's doing well. I was a big fan of his artwork. Mainly, there was one that I always told him, I don't know who painted this painting behind me. It's a cartoon impersonation of New York City, and it's very descriptive in its portrayal. They have, Little Italy, they have Chinatown, they have Wall Street, they have all the stereotypical areas of New York City, and not something I would typically drive towards, except for the fact that I love New York.
Yeah, I was admiring that. So. Yeah, I was admiring that in the background. Yeah, just a couple of notes about some of the things that you mentioned. The MATS program was actually kind of controversial. It had some very, very good parts to it. It was funded by the City of Miami and the Homeless Trust, by our Camillus House Board of Directors, as a means for the police to actually offer shelter to folks as a result of the Pottinger Agreement. And I guess the controversial part, the good part in it is have at least a place to stay in a safe environment and have their possessions protected. The bad part of it is that we were concerned that Camillus not become a quasi-holding cell, that this simply be a means for the police to comply with the technicalities of the Pottinger Agreement without actually doing anything fundamentally to change the homelessness situation, to actually offer shelter. And we saw this as being more of just, show. Very well. Not just that the folks were able to go home the next morning, but also I think that they let them stay 30 to 45 days. And so this actually gave people a chance to kind of like decompress from the trauma of homelessness and possibly connect to other services. So it actually worked out well. It ended last year, last July, when the city lost, when the shelter lost the 70 or $80,000 or whatever it took, to run the program. So starting about a year and a half ago, we didn't have the a match program anymore. And so what we tried to do was focus on the actual in-building emergency shelter programs and try to market that out to other funders. In terms of the arts program, and I'm very happy that you mentioned that because we just had our second annual Camillus Arts Fair, arts exhibition, that we held at Miami-Dade College. I don't know if you were around, if you recall, last March of 2015, we held an arts exhibition at Miami-Dade College's downtown Wolfson campus.
Yeah, I remember
And
that.
so we held it. I don't know if you were there at the reception. It was really nice. This year we held it at Miami-Dade College's campus's North Campus. And it actually turned out a little bit better. Room, we're able to exhibit more pieces of art. We had a very good crowd there. They catered the event, and it was really, really nice. And a couple of things about it. The arts program was really the very first activity that the Consumer Advisory Board worked in collaboration with management on. We did it for a couple of reasons. First, to kind of reinvigorate our Consumer Advisory Board, give us something positive to do. And secondly, provide a nice, fun, beneficial activity for the consumers of Camillus to engage in. And you're right, Gary Allen, he's a very talented artist, painted some very interesting pieces on the cardboard that folks use to sleep on the sidewalk. And those pieces are actually framed in a special room over at the shelter. And he was very active in the arts program and active in the arts exhibitions that we held at Miami-Dade College. It's ongoing. We've had a number of different arts therapists and instructors have come through. It's a very popular program. We always have a core group of artists there. And we find that some incredibly talented people, who have painted and created some amazing works of art. And then invite you to come through if you ever stateside.
I actually have one on my wall. This one was a gift to me
from
the
beautiful.
art. Yeah, and I love this one because I'm not sure if you're aware, but we bought a canoe maybe 3 years ago, and because I was very close with the people in the art program, I would talk to them a lot about it. And I saw that one day, and I told them that it reminded me of being on the water with my wife. And they were like, "Listen, take it." It was like my last week of work there, and they were like, "Take it." I was like, "All right, hey, thank you." And that's actually up on my wall. So that program did a lot of good. My only regret is that I wasn't able to spend more time with that program. I wanted to volunteer for one of the days that they had there, but my position had me running lots of circles.
A lot of artwork hanging around the whole facility. As a matter of fact, a lot of the artwork, the way I phrase it is that the folks are expressing the trauma of homelessness through the beauty of art. And so many of the paintings aren't just random pretty pictures. They actually have a story behind them, and if you engage with the artist, you begin to learn a little bit of the stories. And there's some very interesting works that are displayed within our sexual trafficking unit or human trafficking unit. We have a unit that was established about a year ago where we house victims of human trafficking or exploited and abused women. And many of the artworks on the walls of their bedrooms are painted by women survived the challenges of abuse and the trauma of abuse. And so we protect our identities and we don't name the people. But when I went through and toured that unit, it was amazing when I see that artwork on the walls and look at it as somebody who has gone through the same things that you have gone through, and have risen above that challenge, so it's really powerful symbolism there. And it's more than just, as I said, pretty pictures. There's real stories behind each of these pieces.
Oh, yeah. That was one of the things that I thought oddly connected me with Gary. He had this one painting of it was a man inside of his head. And the only reason he symbolized that was that the outline was the man's head. And inside, he showed all the different directions a man gets pulled in. And it was the division and the symmetry in which he divided the man's head up into certain portions. And I always told him, I said, that one definitely calls out to me, Gary. And he was like, well, why? I said, because that's how I feel all the time. I feel like I'm being pulled in every direction at every
Right.
given moment while I'm here. And he was like, yeah, that's how it feels to be me. And I was like, yeah, that's one area we can connect on. We just always feel like we're pulled in every direction. And yeah, he's extremely talented. I shouldn't say was. He is extremely talented. And as soon as I get stateside again, I'll definitely throw a visit in that direction. It did me a lot of good to work there. Connecting with different people of every kind of walks of life. Growing up, it was always it was always a point. Growing up in New York, growing up back in New York, going back often, spending time in LA. I got to see my share of homeless people growing up, and we never really about it much. It was something that it was like, hey, don't look at him, just don't look at him,
Right.
don't show him any attention, just, ignore him.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a kid, it was like, well, shit, how long can you ignore somebody before, you expect them to just go away on their own,
Right.
And
Or
there
they
was always
direct the police
people
to help them and make them go away.
yeah, and in certain areas, like in Miami, they went ahead and did that. Let's get them out of here. I've heard in LA it's very similar. They have an area of downtown where the homeless population resides, and if they leave that area, then they're jailed. It's a problem in many places. We've seen it here, more so here now where I live, here out in the country of Puerto Rico. When we got here last year, we were staying up in San Juan area, and that's a metro city, so you have your big buildings, you have your residential areas, and then you have your industrial areas.
What city? I didn't hear what you said. What city?
In San Juan, up
Okay.
in northern Puerto Rico, right by where the airport is. And there's some already community teams that are already, in the process of doing what they can to combat homelessness, and if nothing else, to feed and shelter these people. And there was one night that they actually took over this whole. It looked like the outreach program at Camilla's. When Rose pulls out in the van and they squat up on the street.
Right.
They did it right by the highway, and they shut down traffic for, I'd say, about a good hour. What shut down traffic was all the homeless people coming to the area.
Mm-hmm.
It's up there. I don't know how much different it is from Miami. I would say it's probably the same. That's the first thing I thought of was Rose pulling out of her outreach van when we were stuck in traffic, because it was that powerful. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, people who are listening to the podcast for the first time, we had an outreach program led by one of our excellent nurse practitioners, Rose Anderson, and she was seen like the superhero around the neighborhood. When that van rolled around at outreach time in these areas, it was like Santa Claus coming to town.
Right.
And they did that several times a week. That was one of Rose's biggest passions for working there, was that she got to do outreach for, homeless people. She got to treat the sick that are otherwise unattended.
Right.
And
Right.
you
Rose
know,
she's an icon. She is a monumental figure around here.
she
Um,
absolutely is.
yeah, just a comment about your point about dehumanization and trying to ignore folks who are homeless. That is one of the traumas of homelessness. This dehumanizing aspect and this feeling that you're less than a human being.
Mhm.
You're treated like that by folks, who feel uncomfortable around you. I guess at one point, it's sort of like it's a spectrum of feelings. Probably the least worst is the folks that just ignore you, and then you have another group of folks, judgmental views. That you're a sick, irresponsible person, that you're obviously mentally ill or a drug abuser, or there's some type of personal irresponsibility, that's led to your circumstances. And words are powerful. All these words like derelict and bum, and things like that. It's when directed at you, it just increases and compounds the whole trauma. Homelessness is traumatic in and of itself, and it really knocks your sense of self-worth down. And it just makes it harder. It just really keeps you in the cycle of homelessness. It makes it much, much harder for you to break out of that cycle because you tend to give up hope, and you're right, you internalize all those feelings. Yes, I'm worthless, and there is something wrong with me. But the fact of the matter is that, I don't like to use the term homeless person, because a homeless person isn't so much a noun as it is an adjective, simply describing the rather temporary circumstance of an individual. Homeless person is not like being black or gay or Jewish, or something like that. It's not a self-identified group where you take pride in. It's just a temporary set of circumstances. You don't say cancer person, or you don't say, when you use words like crackhead or that drunk,
Yeah.
these instead of somebody suffering from, you're making judgmental calls. And so I awkward phrase, I tend to use words like someone who is experiencing homelessness, just to kind of like keep in mind that it's not something that is a permanent part of of who they are. It's just a temporary set of circumstances that describes that person. So words are definitely powerful. They not only reflect your personal judgment, but they also impact the person that they're directed at, public policy as well. Like I said, when it comes to the Pottinger thing, when you realize that folks are experiencing homelessness, have to perform these life-sustaining activities on the street, they have other choice. And so how can you criminalize that? So that has, I think, can definitely influence, your policy towards the police, and towards making affordable housing, more widespread, because that's basically the central cause of homelessness. Isn't so much personal irresponsibility as it is a societal problem. You have to ask yourself, not so much is this person sick, what's wrong with them, but maybe you ask yourself, what's wrong with society? The wealthiest society on this planet that, abandons a whole group of people that doesn't have safe, affordable housing widespread for every one of its citizens, because I think we believe that housing is a human right, as well as
Should be,
healthcare.
yes. Yeah, it should
Well,
be.
I think it is.
Yeah. There's other people who want to explore space instead. They got billions of dollars and they want to donate it to war. They want to donate it to war. They want to find Mars. They want to find Pluto and pick up rocks from there instead of take care of the brothers and sisters that are right here, right here on this planet. And if you want to go a step further and you want to go a smaller process, and the U.S. is trying to feed Africa, but it won't worry about inner cities in the United States itself. They want to do peace embargoes and treaties everywhere else to gain position. They want to play the chess game.
I don't look at it as a either or a zero-sum game. I think that there is room, no pun intended, for space exploration. Yeah, I think it's just a reallocation of our resource towards things that actually matter instead of going towards corporate welfare and enriching, the 1% that tend to control, government. We have the largest defense budget on this planet in the history of the world. I think, we have a huge black budget where they simply don't even tell, because that's classified, so they can't even say what we're spending. But from what we can tell, we have over $600 billion that we spend on defense. And you say, if that's necessary, how come the world is so screwed up as it is? Okay, so obviously it's not working very well. Right. Okay. But guess who's number two? And guess what they spend? I'll just go ahead and tell you. I just say number two is China. $5 billion. Okay, and they're number two. So basically, we spend more than the top 10 countries combined. Okay, and where's it gotten us? And basically where it's gotten us is that much of it just goes towards the fat cats that run the defense industry, the contractors, and what I think Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. And I think that a lot more can be done to reallocate those resources, okay, to redirect that money towards more useful things like as I said, housing and healthcare, which I believe are basic human rights that all civilized, industrialized societies should provide for its citizens. Because I think that it's not so much a handout as it is helping society reinvigorate itself. Because when you invest in your citizens, you invest in their potential and you help folks to help create and grow your society. So I don't look at it as just, as I said, entitlement and welfare, but I look at it as an investment in its own citizens.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you go ahead and collect rocks on Mars. There's money for that, or the moon, and I think there's also money to help folks in other countries as well. I do think that we have a moral and ethical responsibility. Refugees, we are a nation of refugees. I think we have a moral and ethical responsibility to help folks in our territories and our islands. I know a little bit about the history of the United States' relationship with Spain back in the late 1800s, that led to the acquisition of Puerto Rico and several other territories around the world, and the Philippines and the like, and the United States' rather shameful history of involvement in Haiti and places like that. And it's basically one of exploitation, and wanting to get all the benefits, but doing nothing, to satisfy your responsibility to invest in the people that live in those islands and those territories. So in this current thing, of policy of not allowing Puerto Rico to take advantage of bankruptcy laws and that type of thing, and to restructure its debt. All that's going to come to a head, it seems to me. I think you're more sensitive and more aware of what's going on than I am. I only know what I read in the newspapers. But these are things that you need to do to invest, to, and the consequences of not investing are your homeless situation. is a lack of housing and a lack of opportunities for folks. And then you have this big economic crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So we really need to reallocate, and we need to reinvest in people, and not so much in on profits for the fat cats.
Yeah, they have a lot of politicians here, and depending on who you're talking to, where they're from here, you'll get a different opinion. You'll get some people's opinion that they're better off as a state. You'll get other people's opinion that they're better off independent, away from the U.S. without any involvement. And then you get people that are stuck right in the middle. They should allow us to take benefits as a property, and remain as we are. And as an outsider coming in, what do I see? I see a lot of the same situations that are going on in the U.S. I see a lot of politicians making promises of doing this, that, and the third. And when I speak to the elder people here in my wife's family, you speak to them, and it's like, yeah, well, it's been the same shit for the last 30 years. Everybody comes in, makes the same promise or makes a new promise. None of it gets completed. We're all left back in the same hole we were in, and they just got themselves another couple of politicians approved on the budget to make more money. And I think that I still haven't Googled it just because of my laziness and lack of follow-up, but I was told that there's something like 300 governing bodies in Puerto Rico. When you account that many politicians for the amount of space that we're talking about and the amount of people we're talking about, that sounds like a lot, and especially when you tally up all the salaries that they all make, that comes from money that they receive from the U.S. It's misappropriated. They're putting money where they don't need it. They don't need another smiling face to come and make you promises. They need somebody to come in here and do something. I don't know. What are the good answers? That's a good question.
That is a good question, because unfortunately that same kind of question, or conclusion that is just the same old crap that folks have been doing and promising, empty promises for like the last years of the system of feeling or conclusion that leads to both cynicism, so people don't vote, because they're like, hey, what's the use of voting because nothing changes? And also, by the way, just as an aside, I think it's interesting that the people that vote, poor people don't vote, wealthy people vote, and guess who populates, the politicians? They're all wealthy people, and so the ones that do things for the people that vote, and so it becomes a self-reinforcing perception. Because poor people don't vote, we don't get the politicians in. Okay, and so of course nothing does happen. But even worse is that type of perception breeds a cynicism that leads to folks like our current president-elect. They're like, well, we need somebody to shake up, monkey wrench into the whole process. And so you see this strange phenomenon of folks voting in elect, who promises to destroy the very programs that these people rely upon. I just think it's really interesting. You look at places like Kentucky, for instance, are heavily dependent upon the Medicaid program, and they vote in, somebody who promises to destroy Medicaid, and they don't see the contradiction there. But as long as they think that that's when somebody's going to shake up the system and actually provide opportunities for folks, so we can understand their pain. I can understand their feeling of why they do something like that. Folks are really crying out for change.
Yeah, it's interesting. It was a lot of people that were saying a lot of different things. Both sides of the story, both sides of the coin were dirty. Whatever however you want to label it.
Well, they got a point. I mean, when you're not faced with
Yeah.
good choices,
Yeah. When you give me,
yeah.
yeah, that's,
So this is a big shakeup.
they said it was the largest record of people who didn't vote, with 46% of people not voting this year. That's
Well,
insane.
yeah,
It's insane to
exactly.
the fact that we still, we still do it this way, man. It's nuts. I don't know.
Well,
It's too much work for one person to do.
not only did some, I think only about 42% of people actually vote. Numbers, um, not even half of those 42 people elected, 42% elected our current vice president. So it's something about
Hmm.
20%. Think about that. Of folks, of eligible voting citizens, basically elected our president.
Hmm.
80% did not vote for him. Think about that.
Yeah.
That's an astonishing number, if you ask me.
Yeah.
And 80% of the eligible voters did not elect. And think of the power of the potential power that people have that they're not using. I mean, I read an astonishing statistic that 100 million people basically did not vote. 100 million. To me, that's astonishing. If you could mobilize those folks, create a party for the people that actually provides some type of accountability to politicians and redirects resources to invest in people, not corporate profits, I think we could actually have something really, really good going on in this country. Folks, there's a lot of people, that's a lot of potential power. We have to wake people up and show them that they're not using the power that they have. And we
Yeah.
actually did that here at Camillus. We had a voter registration drive here. That's one of
I'm
the
sorry,
CAB
say that again?
activities. We had a voter registration drive here at Camillus
Oh,
a
yeah,
couple
I
of
saw
months
that.
ago. Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I saw you were volunteering also for the polls, also, or for the voting stations the day of. That was cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That was pretty interesting, man. I was in Little Havana. I was in a voter precinct in Little Havana, and basically it was 90% of the folks voting were elderly Cuban Americans. And I could tell right there before the election results came in that Hillary was going to lose. It was amazing,
Yeah.
how many people were voting for Trump. And it was absolutely amazing. And it really kind of surprised me. I thought that he was going to lose the Hispanic vote, but Cuban vote was going to go for him nevertheless. But man, it was astonishing how many folks were coming in and just telling me. I mean, I wasn't looking at their ballots; they were just telling me that they're
Hmm.
like, when I gave them their ballots, they're like, all I want to do is vote for Trump. Tell me where to do that. I don't care about the other things, other 4 pages of the ballot, because it was like actually it was a 6-page ballot, 5-page ballot that had other stuff on it, for legalizing medical marijuana and electing judges and things like that. But
Yeah.
folks, more than one person would come in and say, all I want to do is vote for Donald Trump. And it's just amazing.
I don't know if you caught it on
But
social media. There was a gentleman who was assaulted in the street in D.C. a couple of days after, and it seems that all the young people who were part of the assault have been charged, or at least the ones that were seen on video hitting the guy. They were just charged yesterday, apparently. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. This is definitely a new time for us.
are you talking about hate crime?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I posted it on the. I just opened up a page now for the podcast. I didn't have a separate page for it before, and somebody was like, "Dude, you should just do a page for it." I was like, "Yeah, all right."
Yeah. Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah, that's going to be a big deal. I read that there is, I think it's in the 400 or 500s now. I mean, we're talking 10 days after the election.
Yeah.
And there's been, I think, over 200. I think it's somewhere around between 200 to 600 incidents of hate crimes, of assaults, and harassment of ethnic and minorities and refugees. So it's definitely for bigotry. But on the other hand, I think that these challenging times can really bring out the best in us. I really think that, when you unmask this bigotry, it's really necessary in order to deal with it and to confront it. And as long as it's simmering, hidden underneath the surface, it never gets resolved. It only gets intensified, and it results in explosions like the Orlando mass shooting, or something like that. So I think that as a society, we have a lot of sick, hateful elements within us. And the good thing, if there is a good thing, of Trump's is at least he's exposing these ugly elements. I mean, it's sort of like the old cliche, sunlight is disinfectant. So when you bring these things out, I think that's the first step towards dealing with it and hopefully resolving it. And I do see this somewhat crisis for people that believe in progressive values. The best time for change is when a crisis occurs. And so we're having a bit of a crisis right now to figure out who we are as a nation. Are we going to be one that cowers behind walls, keeps people out, tries to make America, quote unquote, great again, whatever that dog whistle really means? Okay. Or are we a nation that builds bridges, that connects with people? We recognize that we are a nation of refugees. We are a nation of immigrants. And do we look to, to invest in people in order to bring out the best of their potential? So I think that's a question that we have to decide as a nation. And I think as this country becomes more diverse, you can kind of figure out what the answer to the question is. And so, the next step is, how do we empower people to take control of their lives and to not abdicate our responsibility, to be involved in the political process. We just can't keep letting this wealthy, rich 1% dictate everything. We really need to take responsibility for the direction that their lives take and exercise the latent power that we all have.
Yeah.
So I think we're at an interesting crossroads.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a completely different. This election was a little different for me in the sense that before Obama was elected, we had 8 years of George Bush Jr. I didn't vote for him either time, yet both times he became president. The first one was right before I went into the military. The second one was right after. Or I'm sorry, 4 years in. And at that point, my view on that was, okay, well, this shit is all rigged. I mean, he won Florida twice on the same scandal that got him the first time. This is all rigged. The people in power put whoever they want in there. The first time that I didn't think that was when Obama was elected, because I was like, holy shit. Okay, people actually wanted him, and they got him.
Right.
This is interesting. Maybe it's not all fixed. Maybe there is a point where people have a voice and they can, put it into action.
Yes.
So then Obama came in. Obviously, he made the promises he made, and we are where we are now. The thing that cracks me up is that people act like he was the one that put us into such a bad position, and they forget that he walked into a really shitstorm.
Yeah.
Only months right before he took office, the administration before him put out that $700 billion bailout. And, I was talking to my daughter about that the other day when she was in the frenzy of school, the school talk right after the election. She came home that Wednesday when I picked her up, and it was like, all right, so what'd you learn today? Our typical talk, and so she got into it, about the presidency and what they were talking about in school, and they were like, well, yeah, they say he's going to fix the economy better than Obama did because Obama messed it up. I'm like, all right, listen, she just turned 10. Well,
Right.
she's about to be 11 in March. So, it was like, listen, you were really little back then, but, there's some things that happened right before he took office that affected all of those things, and could definitely make it look like you had worse numbers than that are real for you.
Right.
In his, that should have been measured under his name, is what I mean.
Right.
And she was like, well, yeah, I think I would have liked it if Hillary had gotten elected. And I was like, well, okay, all right. It was hard to tell to turn around and be like, do you understand she should be in prison right now for what happened? Like, it's regardless of opinion of what happens, the facts are the facts, right? The facts are that she is in the Department of Defense. And as a former member of the military, I remember that speech that rule very, very heavily. The information that you have is, for your eyes only.
Mm-hmm.
For her to do what she did knowingly, yeah, there's not really a whole lot you can say for real equal justice when everyone knows about this and she's still walking around free. I mean, this is interesting, to say the least. General Petraeus, I'm sure, has his opinion on it. He was prosecuted for something very similar, and that went through.
Well,
So,
well, I think that regardless of which side you stand on, I think everybody will agree that she was fairly careless or arrogant about what she did. I don't think that the head of the FBI, James Comey, is a big friend or fan of hers. The FBI did conclude that there was no prosecutable offense there.
yeah.
So I don't think that was a political decision that looked at and he just found that there because the guy actually did try election. I mean, he came up with some interesting comments about how careless and irresponsible this was, which is kind of remarkable for a prosecutor. If they decide not to prosecute the case, then they don't normally, go through and just express their opinions, about the the merits of the case. They made a decision. They made a decision, and then he came up with another set of emails. They said they were looking at just a week before the election. So
Right.
he was a big friend of hers. So I don't think that you can say that the system was rigged or that somehow he was favoring her by not prosecuting her. But again, I don't think there's any question that this was a self-inflicted wound, and that's responsible for her defeat. She's a fairly arrogant person, who believes that a different set of rules, apply to the Clintons than apply to everyone else. But
Yeah.
the fact is that folks weren't given much of a good choice. When you've got a terrible candidate, that doesn't exactly motivate you to go out to vote. So we have a problem, and the problem is now we do, reinvigorating the political process, to actually get people yeah. And I think that was the difference with Obama, folks. When you look at who went out to vote, a lot of people were voting for the very first time in their lives. I'll tell you something remarkable. In 2008, I voted early in downtown Miami. Remember the area called Government Center?
Mm-hmm.
And so I showed up early. This is in 2008, and I stood in a line for about 45 minutes. I minded standing in that line. Everybody was laughing, joking, was in a very good mood, and nearly everybody in that line wanted to vote for Obama. And here's the remarkable thing about that line. I talked with two people in front of me and two people in back of me. All four individuals were voting for the very first time in their lives.
Mhm.
All four of them were over the age of 40. Okay, and two of them were immigrants. Just born here in the United States. So I thought that was pretty remarkable. And that's the coalition that Obama had stitched together. And I think that was the difference. And again,
Mhm.
that points out to the power that we have as a people, the power that we're not exercising. That there are 100 million folks out there who do not vote and have an incredible amount of power to change the direction of this country. So Obama is able to tap into some of that, and that's how he got in. So I think that the system, yeah, is rigged towards the rich because they vote. And I think that we need to just reinvigorate ordinary, common, real people. And I think that that's the only thing that's going to make a difference in this country.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, we'll see what happens in another 4 years. We'll see if things have gotten any better, or if the end of times has exactly come upon us. I mean, I don't believe so. Some people see it that way.
Uh-huh. Sounds like a
another
Arnold
administration.
Schwarzenegger movie or Bruce Willis movie or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Some people were joking about California, and they want to break off into their own. I don't know if you've heard about that. They want to break off now to their own republic.
I hear jokes about Canada wanting to build a wall to keep all the Americans from flooding into Canada now.
That's hilarious.
So many people want to move up there because of the election.
That is hilarious. I think we had a signal issue there. What was that?
No. I just think that you're right. This is an interesting crossroads. Whether this is an actually times or in the days. I guess. That's for us to find out. I'm not going to be like. Who was it? It was some sect back in the 1990s, who thought that this comet Kohoutek signaled the arrival of, what was the end of days, so they all drank cyanide or poison in order to join the comet. It's the end of days. If it's the end of days, well, that was a different one. Yeah, that was Jonestown too. Where they all drank poison.
The cyanide, yeah.
I mean, that's beyond our control. If it is the end of days, we're going to find out. But in the meantime, we need to live and take responsibility for what we're doing right here and now, and not just wait around, for the second coming.
Yep.
I mean, to me, that's like a lot of people thought that the beginning of the new millennium, 2000, was going to be the second coming. So.
Yeah, people were convinced then it was going to be the end of days in December 21st, 2012. Everybody thought it was over.
No.
Like, come on, man.
For the last 2,000 years, every prediction has been wrong.
Yep.
Okay, so until it actually happens, let's concentrate on living instead of thinking about the next step. Going.
That's it. Keep on pushing those rocks, man. We we went to the river the day after the election. And we hung out there. I was never much of an adventure junkie for the outdoors. I grew up mostly in the cities, so I was always very uncomfortable with wilderness. Even in Miami, when I first got my canoe, man, my wife would tell you a really funny story. We stopped to have lunch under a bridge one day in a canal, and some lady who lived in that area drove by, saw us on the canal, and she lowered her window to tell us that there had been an alligator there only recently, so to be careful. So here I am, I'm tied off to the bridge, having lunch with my wife. I got a sandwich in my hand, and all of a sudden now I'm seeing little bubbles, and they're coming around the canoe, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Uh-oh.
I got my eye on the water line, and I see these two big nostrils come out of the water, and
Are you
like in the
serious?
yeah. I saw these two big nostrils come out of the water, so I screamed like a little girl. I see. My wife is cracking up at me, and it turned out to be a manatee. The two top nostrils
Oh.
of the manatee came up out of the water, so I screamed like a little girl. Bubbles come up from the water, and the manatee literally shit itself. And I saw
It screamed too.
yeah, he screamed and went under the water. It was like, fuck that. I'm not dealing with this dude. This dude's scared.
That is so funny. You and the manatee looking at each other and screaming, ah!
Yeah. That's the funniest part. I'm screaming because I see manatee nostrils, not knowing what they are, sticking out of the water. But it looked like that scene in the movie, right, when the alligator nostrils come right out of the water and then his whole mouth comes out behind it. That's what it looked like. That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing my face as the wildebeest. Like, oh shit. My wife got a good laugh for that one. Yeah. She got a good laugh out of that one. I wish I had got that on video.
The bad thing is, if it was a shark, you at least hear the music in the background. The dun 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 dun. But it's Jaws. But the manatees are remarkable and kind of frightening unless you realize how gentle they are. And that's one of the first things I saw when I came down here to Florida, and I realized that no, you're not in. This is a very strange city.
Mm-hmm.
But, because I moved into a house about 4 blocks from a canal, and so the second day I was in Florida, I was at the canal, and I see these refrigerator-sized beasts kind of like floating along, with two little, call them manatees. I don't know. And I'm like, oh my God, I usually see these things, behind bars or in a pit in a zoo.
Yeah.
See them out there in regular nature, along with, I think I saw a 5-foot-long orange iguana,
Wow.
just kind of like sitting there. Yeah, the whole thing had to be, his body was maybe about 2 or 3 feet, and his tail was another 2 or 3 feet. Just some stuff on the side of the road. It's really a very different place, So that's definitely not the type of environment that I grew up in Chicago. So you got that stuff down
we
in Puerto
actually
Rico too, I suppose.
We tried some iguana here a couple months ago.
You ate an iguana?
Yeah. Yeah, it was actually really good. Not gonna lie to you, really good. I was really sketchy at trying it at first. I was like, man, I don't know if I want this. This thing was just. We have a mango tree in the backyard, and that's where we grabbed it from. It was a huge, iguana, maybe like 5-6 feet, and my wife's cousin, took the axe, chopped his neck, broke his neck, one shot, one kill, and then we decapitated him. His mother's boyfriend was here that weekend, and that guy he's from Florida, and he was like, dude, we skin and grill alligators every time it's hunting season in Florida. So, and an iguana's nothing but a small alligator, dude. I can chop them up and we can eat them. I was like, hey, if you're gonna do the work, man, I'll eat them. No problem. Took a knife in the iguana, took out all the meat parts, like woo, and not for nothing, man. It was really good, really good. It was the best. It was the closest to chicken wings I've had since I've gotten here.
It tastes just like chicken, huh?
It tastes just like chicken. It was great. I was like, man, I feel like I'm back in Miami, back at Wingstop. It was good. It was good.
Reminds me of a Far Side cartoon. Reminds me of a Far Side. Remember that cartoon, The Far Side?
Yeah.
It's got these 2 bears, and you see the clothing sitting to the side, and one bear snacking on the bone, and he says, "Hey, it tastes just like chicken."
It's all meat, you know. It's all meat. It's all good. Yeah, we've been having an interesting run at it, man. We when we first got here, we moved to this townhouse in town, and yeah, I won't lie to you, there wasn't much of a difference between that and Miami. You know, aside from the fact that I wasn't driving to work every day. That was pretty much the biggest difference. But now we moved here into my wife's grandmother's house, where you know she grew up and her father grew up, and man, I like it here way better. You know, I mean, we're out in the countryside now. Yeah, yeah, I like it much, much better. It's way more peaceful here, and that, you know, people take that to mean a lot of different things. You know, when I say peaceful, nobody's impeding on our life here. We're not hearing noise 24 hours a day. I mean, as I said before, you know, I live on a main road, so I hear a lot of traffic throughout the day. You know, I say it's peaceful compared to places I've been before. You know, I mean, I've spent a lot of my life in New York, Los Angeles, Miami. We lived for a very short time in Texas. So, you know, most of the places I've lived have been very noisy, you know, populations very large, you know, unable to escape people, you know, whereas here, aside from the people driving back and forth, nobody really comes around here. You know, I mean, this entire street is mostly family. There's a different family living across the street from us, and that's pretty much it. There's a banana field next to us that way. And then there's a field that they're going to convert literally across the street here to whatever the company is going to put in plant here. But, you know, it's nice and peacefully quiet. At the same time, you know, there was a murder last week just down the street on the bridge, you know, so things aren't as active here as they are anywhere else, you know. In speaking with my wife's cousin who's here, you know, he grew up here most of his life, and they see things as really screwed up, you know. They're like, man, it's really bad here. And when I got here, it was like, well, I mean, you know, not for nothing, man, it's bad all over the place. Right. You know, I mean, if you guys are under the disillusion that it's bad here, nowhere else, you got that shit dead wrong. You know, I mean, that's not how it is at all. I mean, in the walking distance between Camilla's house and Camilla's health, you know, there's that area there, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know the specific name of that neighborhood.
Overtown.
I would. Is that directly Overtown in that distance between them two? Okay, so yeah, wow. Overtown, Miami. Yeah. Probably most famous for being on the First 48, that series that A&E put out about murder investigations. At least I think that was my first introduction to Overtown, was on TV. You know, we when we moved down there, my mother's husband at the time was into you know, illegal activities. So we lived in a really nice house in Kendall, in West Kendall, and we were very far away from Overtown and everything else like that. And we never really left Kendall. We just got into you know, less expensive parts of Kendall and ended up where we ended up. When I was living with my wife, we were off of 107th and Kendall. So, mm-hmm. You know, we were a good distance away from it. But, you know, you hear about Overtown, and then the first time I saw it was on the First 48 on that murder investigation show. And then, you know, I was working there. So it was interesting, and especially all the times that I walked to the house or walked from the house to the clinic. And all the young ladies from the area would give me these dirty looks, like, dude, what are you doing? You know, like, why are you walking through these neighborhoods?
Oh, really?
Like, yeah, they would freak out. They were like, dude, you can't be walking through these neighborhoods. You know, you shouldn't walk through there. I'm like, why? What's going to happen? Like, oh, you get shot. Like, you know, there's only so many times uh, there's only so many things you can do to put yourself in that situation. I myself am not a flashy individual. To anybody looking to rob somebody, I don't look like a good target. I don't look like I have much. So, I'm all right with that viewpoint. And anything else you're going to get killed for is something you typically started. So I typically said to myself, I extend a good courtesy when I'm out and about, and I've found myself, encounterless since. 33 years old. I've never had an encounter of that magnitude, simply for the fact that I don't cross those lines. You know, um,
Mhm.
my wife is positive she heard shots last night while we were asleep. I didn't hear them. I haven't heard any news this morning of any activity. So, it's interesting. We had a water issue last week. I posted the video live. We've had some severe rain in the last couple of weeks in a part of the island that doesn't rain a lot. So it took its toll on our water system, and they have power plants here in the mountains because of all the natural spring water that comes out of the mountain. They use that in the dams, and they get the power from it. And they made a call last week to let go of the dam and to let it flow natural so that it wouldn't break. And the subsequent effects of that left our neighborhood flooded. So it was interesting. We were walking around in knee-high water. But none of it got in the house, luckily, and everybody's fine, But it was just that interesting moment where, the police are coming by, and this is the part where I thought it was completely the opposite of Miami. In Miami, when there's weather coming, it's usually a hurricane, and everything's on the news, and there's, telling you to go to Home Depot and to Walmart and get stocked up on your water and your supplies and whatnot. Here they came by with buses for evacuation. I mean, they had school buses that were lined up, at least 4 or 5 of them that were just driving around the neighborhoods trying to collect everybody who didn't want to be in this area when the floods came by. And it was interesting to see how coordinated they were. The police had driven by about 5 o'clock right before they let loose the river, or right before they let loose the dam. And they were telling us to move all the cars out of the streets so that we wouldn't get stuck. They're very preventative here, is I guess the point I'm trying to get to.
Mhm.
But I remember once in Miami, I don't remember what the year was. I was in high school, so it was between 97 and 2001. There was a flood in West Kendall, and there was no response. I mean, we didn't see a cop that entire day, and we were walking around in knee-high water, So, it was just
Wow.
interesting. Yeah. And we're talking West Kendall, you know what I mean? There's probably more police stations in West Kendall than there are in the rest of Miami. And we didn't see a cop the entire day. Nobody came around to explain the situation. It just 2 days later, it just got cleared up, sight unseen. So it was interesting to see the flip side of the response team here. They were all over the place, fire department, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting. It definitely gave me glimpses of the tsunami footage that we saw a couple of years ago. Just in the fact that you saw entire trees, and we're talking very old trees, very big trees, just ripped out, and they were being carried down the river. It's nuts. Fortunately, we ended up all right, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just interesting to see the different responses. What the priorities are here as opposed to what the priorities are there.
Yeah, well, you talk about Miami's overtown neighborhood. I guess it depends on who you are, and your
Mm-hmm.
skin being obviously a lighter complexion than my skin. So I guess, folks were, a little more concerned for you
Mm-hmm.
for someone. Um, I've never had any issues in that neighborhood, but you do hear about things going on.
Mm-hmm.
get a lot of violence associated with it. Turf battles and disgruntled customers and that type of thing. And
Hmm.
robberies and the like. So that's the primary, I think, factor that motivates any violence down there. But that's just a symptom of our society. Where we create and maintain these pockets of poverty, don't provide much of an avenue for outside of it, and then use the results, where people don't have any other alternative but to engage in criminal activity. And we use that
Hmm.
result to condemn the victims, to condemn the very people, who are really the victims of society, that are forced to use these types of methods to make a living. I mean, here in Florida, we if you have a felony conviction, guys permanently from voting, but felony convictions restrict the type of jobs that you get, shut off whole avenues of jobs, and also restrict the type of housing that you get. Many landlords will not let you in their on properties and public housing even at your criminal past, and that can preclude you even from affordable housing. And so what society does is basically condemn you into a life of crime, where now that's your only alternative. On
It's
the
your only way
road,
of income.
exactly, you're stuck in it, and then folks will look at that and say, oh, that's a crime-ridden community, and those people are just criminals and irresponsible and just violent. Now it's a way for other people then to just reinforce their perceptions of you and of your group, and basically it's just a way to keep you down, keep you from getting anywhere and breaking out of that cycle. I was listening to a very interesting program this morning on NPR. It was Chris, what's her name, Tippett's. Yeah, she does on Sunday morning on Being. They had Isabel Wilkerson was being interviewed. She wrote this book called The Warmth of Other Suns, and it's about the Great Migration from the South into northern cities, from starting in the early 1900s through the 1970s, I believe it was. And
Okay.
one big point that she made, the place that accepted blacks, just like the place that accepts many immigrants, are the worst parts of town. Okay, the parts where basically crime is rampant, horrible. There's junk and dirt and filth on the streets, and so when people set up house in these types of communities, guess what? Okay, that's exactly environment influences to a large extent your feelings, your perceptions, and attitudes. And so when you set up shop in the worst part of town, one is filled with crime, is any surprise is going to be rampant. That you yourself are going to be involved in crime, either as a perpetrator or a victim. So that's what happens, and that's the same story that's being repeated in many communities across America, time and time again. When refugees and new immigrants, and the poorer blacks come in from the South, and you complain that their communities are crime ridden. Well, guess what? Those were the communities where they were directed to.
Hmm.
So I don't think it's any big surprise. It's simply the results of the circumstances that that was the only place that you had that was accepting of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again,
There was
I
a
think you have to look
podcast.
at.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think you just to conclude, you have to look at this as that there's a big societal component. I don't want to, minimize the personal responsibility component, but you have to also recognize the societal component in this as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, yes, it's easy to point and say, yeah, you should hold yourself responsible, but you know, there's many places in the world that if you're born a certain way, you know, you're not accepted. I mean, look at China just recently reviewed their policy on the one child, you know, allowed per family, and now they've actually lifted that. So now it's okay for, you know, for you to be born a Chinese woman now. You know, it's once again okay to be born a Chinese woman. That, you know, they won't put you to death or put you in an orphanage just because you're a woman now. You know, so that's you know, in one aspect of the world, that's one way to look at it. You know, depending on where you're born, depends on your circumstance. There's a lot that can be said about that, but there's also, you know, you're born into the circumstance, and then once you're there, if you reach the age where you can then act for yourself, you know, then you can get out and you know, find your way, you know, as they say. You know, find that individual route that you can take to better your situation. But to act like everything's on the even playing field is, you know, I mean, that's just not the way it is. You know, the playing field hasn't been leveled since the start of this country. You know, will we see it leveled or at least equal out in the coming years? You know, I'd like to say let's hope so. You know, that would be a beautiful thing. I think with the progressive, I don't know if that's a correct term to use, but in the progression of human beings mixing races, which I think is a great thing, you'll see that you know, go away a little bit more with time. You know, there was the movie Braveheart set it in the opposite direction. I like to think of it. You know, they were talking about how they got rid of the Scotsman, and they said, you know, they breed them out. You know, that they would. I don't know if you remember that movie with Mel Gibson, but
yes.
You know, the King was talking about how they get the Scottish people out of Scotland, and his answer was to breed them out. So on the night of the woman's wedding, one of the English guys was able to take her virginity instead, and you know, there goes that. But in the larger sense of, yes, we're breeding out hatred. You know, with every interracial child born, we breed out a little bit further hatred that goes a long way. And you know, that's just one small thing that can make a big shift in the long run. You know, I mean, today's society, it's very allowing in that sense.
That's a big hope. I do think so, you know, and more interracial cities that I've been in. I'm racially diverse, I should say. Cities that I've been in, Chicago, for instance, and D.C., two cities where I both grew up in and lived for most of my adult life.
Mm-hmm.
Especially Chicago is incredibly segregated. I mean, there's pockets of diversity, but for the most part, the South and you know, whites live on the West and in the North. St. Louis is incredibly, where I spent 3 years in graduate school, is the most segregated city I've ever seen in my life. There was a small, tiny, single neighborhood in St. Louis that any amount of diversity that was near a premier college called Washington University. And aside from that, it was like strict black and white neighborhoods. Miami, I've probably seen more interracial couples here than I've seen in any other city. I think a lot has to do with probably the Hispanic Latino population because, as you know, I mean, Hispanics come in colors, you know, in all races, and so, you know, perhaps that's, you know, a large part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I do hold out hope for the future. You know, I mean, look at me. I look like a typical Black American, but I've got the most Rainbow Coalition, racial diverse family that you'd ever imagine. My grandfather, not great grandfather, because I think he probably was white, but my grandfather could pass for white. He was so light complexioned. If you look on my Facebook page and see my father, I don't know if you can tell or not, that's the older man standing in the background. He's very, very light complexioned. And my family's from Minnesota. Many of them married women who are either Indian or Asian. If you look at my cousins, I've got some cousins who are blonde hair and blue eyed. And so it's amazing that they would have me as a first cousin. You know, I'm very proud of the fact that we look like America, and that we
Yeah,
look like the world.
that's a beautiful thing, man. More and more that'll start to reflect as the generations go by, and
Yeah, I'm
eventually,
very,
you know,
very hopeful.
yeah, yep. All right. We have definitely passed our hour. So I guess
Okay.
the last part we touch on now is, the largest perception shift, sir, that you have had from childhood till today. What's something that you, at one point, were so very concrete on, and at some point, that became a very fluid conversation for you.
Um, I'd have to say that my experience with homelessness has been a huge shift in my consciousness. That, as I mentioned earlier, that, the whole issue of homelessness is shifting from the individual and more to, what are the what are the socioeconomic reasons why this person is in his circumstances. That has been a huge shift in my perception. Um, I think that it's increased my empathy and my perception, my awareness for other people. It's permanently changed my life and changed the direction that my life, I think has taken. So I think I spend a lot more time, more focused now, um, on societal issues. Because really the bottom line is, and this goes back to a conversation we were having a few minutes ago, that folks who are experiencing homelessness are different from you or me or anybody who has a roof over their head.
Hmm.
It really goes to support. That's what it really goes to. If you or me or somebody else misses a couple of paychecks, you have family, you have other institutions that you can go to for support. The one unifying factor among everybody who's homeless is lack of support. There is no safety net, that insulates them from the concrete of the sidewalk. And that is really the fundamental difference. So that's what this whole homelessness thing has done for me, has shown that there's really not much difference between the and the house population, except for that lack of support now directed to is increasing support mechanisms for people who are suffering from homelessness. So
Right on.
hope that answers your question. Hope I wasn't too long-winded there.
No, not at all. David, thank you for joining us today. That's going to be our show for this week. Real quick plugs. If you are looking to get married in the South Florida area, please visit mermaidbeachweddings.com. Let them know Sal sent you, and you can get a discount on your package. Also, if you are in need of, it's a small business, does beach weddings, and they specialize in it. A lot of people have attempted, and you can hear the difference in the quality when they're scrambling. So these guys, they specialize only in beach weddings. They don't do any other kind of weddings. And you can check them out at mermaidbeachweddings.com. Also,
Okay.
if you're looking to get your credit fixed, you can go to a1credit.us. They are based out of Miami, but they do work all over the U.S. and in the islands. So please give them a shout out. Also, let them know Sal sent you, and they'll take care of you a little special. So other than that, everyone, enjoy your weekend, and there's only really the rest of Sunday left. So make the most of it, and take care of each other. Remember, it's two main ways to go about changing what you're doing. It's change what you're doing or change how you feel about it. And till the next time, this is Sal signing off, and you guys take care of each other. Take care.